There's a silent threshold that most people cross without realizing it. It doesn't figure in life manuals, it's not taught in schools, it doesn't appear on calendars, and it's rarely mentioned in family council meetings. Yet, one day, it suddenly surfaces and profoundly changes the course of one's existence. It usually occurs around the age of 60. On the surface, everything seems unchanged. The body slows down, the days become more sober, emotions seem to fade. Yet, inside, a subtle yet unmistakable change takes shape. It's the soul slowly changing direction, not with fanfare, but with a silent and discreet movement. It's not a visible fracture, but rather a subtle detachment from ancient goals. The desire to please dissolves, the need to prove fades, and even once pressing ambitions fade. The soul, then, retreats, not like someone fleeing, but like someone longing to recover something left behind, fragments buried in the ruins of urgency, unexpressed sacrifices, unaddressed abysses. Carl Gustav Jung argued that the first half of life is dedicated to building the self, while the second is dedicated to returning to the soul. If you too feel this transformation affects you, leave a like now. I'll understand, and I'll know that you too are going through this silent curve. It's your way of saying, I'm here too. This return is not painless. The soul, approaching the threshold of 60, no longer tolerates masks. It rejects artifice, repudiates inauthenticity, demands truth. And truth often involves the awareness that many experiences have been lived solely for survival. At this time, feelings of alienation often surface, as if one had been acting out a script up until that point. Even with apparent balance, many feel a fatigue that is not physical, but existential. It's not depression, but clarity. It's the soul whispering. The time has come to change course, to stop looking outside for what lies within. This period prompts one to re-examine one's history, marriage, children, career choices, old wounds. Everything resurfaces, not to wound, but to integrate. The soul, at 60, yearns for wholeness, no longer for titles, possessions, or idealized bodies, but for silence and peace. It longs to know that, despite everything, there still exists beauty, meaning, and essence waiting to be revealed. It is a season of inner purification, in which the hidden drawers of the psyche are unlocked to let go of inherited fears, grant forgiveness to those who have failed to give love, abandon the obligation to appear invincible, and finally recognize oneself in one's true nakedness. Those who cross this threshold with a steadfast spirit discover that the soul knows no aging. It returns to its purest essence. And what once seemed like an epilogue is actually revealed as the dawn of a more authentic way of being. This is the untold secret, the unspoken curve. But for those who know how to listen, it becomes the path to the inner home. Some call this time maturity, others old age. Yet, there is something that transcends names. At 60, the body slows, but the soul silently accelerates. What had been postponed now demands space. Unresolved issues whisper, now is the time. This movement, however, manifests not in the visible, but in the invisible. It happens one day for no apparent reason. You wake up and realize that certain clothes no longer belong, that certain conversations seem sterile, that what was once a source of pride now weighs like a burden. The soul begins to ask itself, what still animates me? What authenticity remains within me? What would I do if I no longer had to please anyone? These questions sprout like the seeds of a new cycle, because time, at 60, is not measured in quantity, but in quality. It is no longer external urgency that guides, but internal urgency. Jung argued that once the phase of adaptation and conquest has passed, the psyche requires reintegration. This happens only if one has the courage to contemplate what has been forgotten. The shadow, as he defined it, demands presence. It is not negativity, but what has been excluded, suppressed dreams, denied intuitions, childhood wounds. At 60, all of this resurfaces, not as a burden, but as an opportunity. It's not uncommon to feel the sudden desire to change direction, to resume studies, to end harmful relationships, to start over where it seemed too late. Because the soul's time is not marked by clocks, but by an inner call. When the soul senses that, despite the struggles, there is still life, it tries again, refuses to waste its remaining years on pretenses. This is why so many women blossom at this age. They stop apologizing, diminishing their strength, asking permission to exist. The beauty that blossoms at 60 has nothing to do with appearances. It resides in freedom, truth, integrity. A beauty that is uncomfortable for those who still live by appearances because it is too authentic, too calm, too true. Those who have gone through it no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone. Perhaps you too, deep down, feel that this curve has arrived. Old roles are too tight for you. You long to delve deeper, to care for the essential, to say a guilt-free no and a truthful yes. This impulse is not narcissism, but an awakening. The sign of an inner transition that marks the beginning of a new season, in which one no longer lives to please others, but starts from one's own authenticity. This inner impulse ushers in a life where one renounces external approval and embraces fidelity to oneself. Many, having reached this threshold, experience a new peace, the peace that comes from fully being who one is, without fear or justification. Authentic maturity, therefore, coincides with the freedom to exist according to one's own internal rhythm, and what once seemed like decline now reveals itself as the full flowering of being. This state of awareness leads to embracing solitude not as a lack, but as a fulfillment of oneself. Silence is no longer a source of discomfort, but a refuge. Time is no longer measured, it expands. Inner space becomes a place of respite, of memory, of sensation, of lightness. One understands that one no longer needs to explain oneself. One is, and that is enough. He who understands remains. He who does not see moves away. But this no longer hurts, since an awakened soul recognizes only another awakened soul. In this silent, wordless recognition lies the most authentic connection, a meeting of mirrors, a dance of the unsaid, the certainty that a life fully lived is still possible. When the soul changes direction, everything that was hidden resurfaces, sometimes as a breath, sometimes as a tremor, but always as an invitation to become who we are without fear. It is then necessary to let go of past versions, the narratives of others, the obligation to be useful, perfect, admired. At 60, it's no longer what you do that matters, but what you feel while doing it. The intention that drives the action, the depth that sustains the word. You realize that the greatest lessons come not from the pain itself, but from the way you navigated it, from the choices made in silence, from the boundaries drawn after many sacrifices. This invisible baggage is what sustains you now. It doesn't appear in the titles, but is reflected in your gaze, your gestures, your silent forgiveness. The mature soul no longer relies on others, but on itself. It perceives subtle signals, honors internal rhythms, knows when to remain silent and when to tremble in order to speak. This is not fragility, but wisdom. It is what remains when everything else collapses. It is what flourishes when the armor cracks. It is what lives when one chooses to be authentic. Jung argued that the second half of life is not about conquering, but about integrating. What was divided now recomposes itself. The forgotten feminine, the repressed masculine, the wounded child, and the wise old woman finally find a meeting point. From this union springs a new strength, not one that imposes or dominates, but one that protects and preserves. It is a silent power, rooted and luminous from within. This is the vital current that accompanies the soul along the path of the years without wearing it down. It needs no adornments. All it needs is authenticity, quietude, and the courage to remain true to itself. There comes a moment when everything falls into place, not because the world changes, but because what was restless becomes peaceful. At 60, the soul no longer pursues speed. It seeks depth. It doesn't desire immediate answers, but presence. It craves not external conquests, but stillness within the body. At this point, one understands that life has never been about possessions, but about authenticity, being yourself, even in the face of misunderstanding, remaining true to your truth, even when uncomfortable, being whole, even after many fractures. At 60, losses have taken their toll, illusions have dissolved, paths revealed. Yet, within you, something continues to vibrate, a breath, a dream, the desire to live no longer out of duty but for joy. This yearning for lightness is proof that the soul is alive. Jung considered this phase the most sacred, the time when the ego bows to the soul, appearance gives way to essence, and one learns to walk without the weight of the world on one's shoulders. In this inner rest, the true meaning of existence is revealed, not the one received, but the one discovered. If you've read this far, you probably feel this call within you. Perhaps you've recognized dormant parts of your soul between these lines. If this has touched you, leave a quote in the comments that gives voice to this new chapter that begins, like a silent vow, an intimate decision, a whisper of the soul. If this journey has touched a deep chord within you, please like it, share a quote in the comments that expresses your inner awakening, and subscribe to the channel to continue together on the next steps on the soul's journey. A sincere hug from Philosophy of the Invisible. Here, every silence finds its voice and every soul finds fertile ground to flourish.